Live from Beirut, this is BBC News. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says Israel's firing on UN peacekeepers in Lebanon is intolerable and a violation of international humanitarian law.
Peacekeepers must be protected by all parties of the conflict, and what has happened is obviously condemnable.
Israel carries out its deadliest attack on central Beirut since the escalation of its war with Hezbollah, with at least 22 people dead. This is the scene live in Beirut this afternoon as rescue and recovery work continues where those 2 Israeli airstrikes happened late yesterday.
And I'm Anita McVeigh in London, also on the programme. Emergency services in the United States have rescued thousands of people from flooded parts of Florida after Hurricane Milton hit the state yesterday, killing at least 16 people.
But look at this. They've had 2 hurricanes here, back to back, within a fortnight. And so people here are asking the question how long they can keep going like this.
And this year's Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to the Japanese anti-nuclear group Nihon Dankyo, which is made up of survivors of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki attacks.
Hello, you're with BBC News. I'm Anna Foster, live here in Beirut. Now, just in the last hour or two, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has been talking about Israel's firing on UN peacekeepers in the south of Lebanon, something that we had reported yesterday and again this morning. He has accused Israel of, in his words, violating international humanitarian law after the second attack on UN peacekeepers this morning. Mr. Guterres called the incident intolerable, and those comments come as the UN begins its investigation into who was responsible for that explosion close to a UNIFIL observation point in which 2 more people were injured. On Thursday, the UN said that Israel fired at a different observation post, injuring 2 Indonesian soldiers who were serving in the peacekeeping mission. Now, Israel has asked UNIFIL to pull back from its posts close to the border there, but it has refused to do so. France has now also summoned Israel's ambassador over their reports. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said that peacekeepers have to be protected.
I condemn the fact that there was shooting against the UN premise, wounding 2 peacekeepers, which is a violation of international humanitarian law. Peacekeepers must be protected by all parties of the conflict, and what has happened is obviously condemnable. There was naturally a reaction from many sides in solidarity with the peacekeepers that were wounded, and in telling Israel very clearly that this incident is intolerable and it cannot be repeated.
Well, I'm joined by Amal Mudalali, who's Lebanon's former ambassador to the UN. Thank you for joining us here on BBC News. What is your reaction to what we've seen and heard here in the last 2 days with Israeli forces firing towards UN peacekeepers?
Thank you, Anna, for having me. And it's remarkable that this happened, the incident today happened in less than 24 hours of the Security Council meeting, and almost unanimously there was a consensus on condemning yesterday's attack and calling on Israel to respect peacekeepers and respect their safety. Well, it seems that the Israelis are not listening to anybody now, because the P5 condemned, the P5, the members of P5 said we're concerned, we don't want any attacks on the peacekeepers. But Israel keeps treating the UNIFIL, where 50 countries have troops there, as the populations of Lebanon and Gaza. They want them to move. So every time they want to do an operation, they move people from one place to the other. So it's really unconscionable at this time and in this time of an age that there's a country that does not have any regard to international law or international humanitarian law or for its respect for the United Nations, which is a member of the United Nations. The problem is the United States is in the middle of an election campaign, and Washington says that it has very limited influence over Israel. And this is a big problem, because if Israel is not going to answer its closest ally, we have a big problem.
Do you think those UNIFIL peacekeepers there should move? Because obviously they're there to assist the Lebanese armed forces, and they're supposed to be assisting in creating that buffer zone south of the Litani River and north of the border. But that hasn't been happening. Would it be better for them to move and allow Israel, as they want to do, to actually clean out that area themselves?
You know, the problem with asking them to leave is that these forces are not there at the invitation of Israel. They are there by a mandate from the United Nations Security Council. So there's an international mandate for them. So Israel has no right to ask them to move from one place to the other. Only the Security Council and the will of the international community can ask them to move from one place to the other. The other problem, which is the biggest problem, is this incident and these two incidents and the attitude of Israel towards the peacekeepers raises serious questions about the intentions of Israel and the goals of Israel in the area. Because Israel said they have a limited operation. But till today, we don't know, even Washington doesn't know, what is the scope of that operation? How long is this operation is going to be? Where are the limits of this limited operation? Is it going to be to the Litani River, to the Awali? Is it going to end in Beirut as 1982? This is a big problem. Washington says they don't have any idea about what the operations limits are going to be. And in their talks with each other, the Israelis and the Americans, about the Iranian retaliation, whatever this operation is going to be, they said that they expect clarity and transparency from the Israelis about the kind of operation. But do we have clarity and transparency about what kind of operation they have for Lebanon? That's very important. And you don't want to say, we're going to have an operation, and you end up with a long-term 20 years of occupation. And the people are warning here, even American officials, of mission creep. And this is a very concerning thing for everybody concerned.
So how Amal, might that issue be solved? Because the UN have spoken very strongly, and as have ambassadors around the world now, about what is happening to those UNIFIL peacekeepers. Where is the answer to this? Does it need to come politically, diplomatically from inside Lebanon? Maybe what do you think should happen?
Yesterday, everybody at the Security Council the meeting said that there's no military solution. There should be a political solution. And the political solution should start with going back to Resolution 1701 and implementation of 1701. And I want to remind you and remind everybody that Lebanon, since 2006, the war of 2006 and the adoption of Resolution 1701, we have not had a ceasefire in South Lebanon. We had cessation of hostilities. And there's a difference there, because when you have cessation of hostility, that means you have to do certain things to move to a ceasefire. And the Israelis have not accepted that. And in Lebanon also, we have not implemented 1701 the way it should be too. So I think it's time now that 1701 should be implemented. You go back and you see what are the requirements of this resolution, by Israeli withdrawing, the Lebanese army taking control of the south without any other militia or any other military force other than the Lebanese army. And then you can, go back and revive all the mechanisms of 1701, which basically there is the tripartite committee in the south, which used to bring together the United Nations, the Israelis and the Lebanese, and militarily, and they discuss all the issues of the withdrawal and all the concerning issues for both sides. You can start by doing that, because if you're going to go back to the Security Council now and ask for a Security Council resolution, good luck. Because yesterday we saw the Security Council is paralyzed. Yesterday the Russians and the Americans basically traded the accusations and they were at each other's throats. So I don't think we can get a resolution very soon. Yeah, you have to go back to one.
Yeah. There's a lot of conversation happening, isn't there, but not necessarily much concrete action. Amal Moudallali, thank you for joining us, Lebanon's former ambassador to the UN. The Israeli military, just in the last few moments, has put out a statement about that, expressing deep concern, they say, over those incidents. They say they're currently conducting a thorough review. The Israeli military saying it's been notified that 2 UN peacekeepers were inadvertently, they say, hurt during combat against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. So we'll continue to watch that story for you here on BBC News. Also, rescuers here in Beirut have been continuing to comb through the rubble of 2 Israeli airstrikes here in central Beirut yesterday evening. These are the pictures from the scene. As you can see live at the moment, that rescue and recovery work has been continuing throughout the day. 22 people, we know, were killed in those airstrikes, more than 100 injured. They came yesterday evening around about 8 p.m. local time without a warning. Reports that a senior member of Hezbollah was the target of that attack, but we don't know yet for sure who that was, although the name Wafik Safa, who's a powerful figure within Hezbollah, has been mentioned, but no concrete news on whether or not he was there or whether he survived the attack or was killed. Our correspondent, Karine Torbay, has been at the scene of those attacks today.
I'm in Basta. This is a very popular residential area in the heart of Beirut, the capital. Behind me is the site of one of the airstrikes that hit a building. That was a multi-story building reduced to nothing but rubble. And you can see the dust as rescuers and tractors are still, working really hard after very long hours yesterday to remove the rubble and to look whether there is anyone who is still stuck there. The people here, I mean, the residents of this building, of this area, the people who are, acquainted to this neighborhood, passers by, they are all in total shock. They stand here, look at this and tell me that they had never, ever in their life imagined that this area could be targeted. This is a very mixed neighborhood between Sunnis and Shia. People here have lived side by side for decades. They know each other by name, they're friends, they're neighbors, and they're also relatives in many cases. And what they saw today, what they woke up to, this site, is really very frightening for them, because in their mind, despite all what is happening, there was still some sort of a framing for all the targetings happening in Lebanon. There were still areas considered safe and others unsafe. This one was considered safe. This one is an area that received lots of displaced people from other places in the country because they thought this is a place where it is convenient to seek refuge. But today, all of this idea of the limits between what is safe and unsafe is completely shattered, and people are extremely scared that can be that in everywhere and anywhere someone can be targeted, and there is nowhere in Lebanon that could be deemed safe.
Karine Torbay there at the scene of what was last night the third attack outside the southern suburbs in central Beirut since this Israeli air campaign started in the capital. Much more to come from here throughout the day, so stay with us here on BBC News.
Anna, thank you very much, and welcome back here to London. Let's take a look at some of the day's other main news. And President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Berlin, where he's been meeting the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz as part of a whirlwind tour of European allies. He's trying to secure more military and financial support for the war against Russia. Germany is the biggest donor after the United States. President Zelensky wants to use long-range missiles to strike back at Russia, but so far Germany and other allies have refused to supply the weapons. Well, joining me now is Ukraine military advisor Yuri Sak. Thank you very much for joining us on BBC News. And what do you think President Zelensky has been saying in that conversation with Chancellor Scholz to try to change minds?
Good afternoon. President Zelensky is on a very important tour in European countries because we are now more than 2.5 years into this largest war since the Second World War. We have our vision. We understand the challenges that we are facing. We understand that our enemy is, more resourceful. It has more in terms of manpower, equipment. But we also understand that our enemy hopes to outlast Ukraine in this war. They hope for a war of attrition. Now, President Zelensky is touring Europe today and yesterday, meeting the leaders of the European countries and sharing with them our vision of victory and our vision of the victory plan. And these meetings are very important because we already are seeing that as a result of these meetings, we are getting reassurances of the European countries in terms of continued support for Ukraine going forward.
Just for our audience, we're hearing Chancellor Scholz before that meeting saying that by the end of the year, Germany and other allies would put together a new military aid package for Ukraine worth $1.5 billion. But there was no mention of those long-range Taurus missile systems that Germany has. The Ukrainian MP, Kira Rudik, told the BBC a little earlier that time is running out for Ukraine. Now, when you talk about that war of attrition that you believe Russia wants to continue with, so far, Ukraine has surpassed expectations in terms of its ability to hold Russia at bay. But do you think time is running out on that particular front, given the greater manpower, for example, that you allude to Russia having?
Well, Amita, we have to stay optimistic, of course, and we have to continue our efforts with regard to becoming more self-reliant and self-sufficient. This is why part of the issues that were discussed by President Zelensky with our European partners is the investments of the European partners into the so-called arsenal of the free world, which we are building now in Ukraine. We are creating, weapons. We are getting information from the battlefield as to how to improve them, and we are confident that with time, Ukraine will be the arsenal of the free world, the arsenal of the free democratic world. But of course, time is precious, and we understand that Russia is not going to give up anytime soon. We are facing a very difficult winter. This is why another important issue that the president is raising with our partners in Europe is provision to Ukraine more of the air defense systems, because you know that the situation with the energy infrastructure is critical, and we need to make sure that we are capable of protecting our power plants, our electricity grids, and this is also an important issue on the President's agenda.
And to what extent do you think the uncertainty over who's going to be in the White House after November's presidential election is affecting what's happening on the ground in Ukraine and perhaps holding back European leaders at the moment from making decisions related to Europe? They're waiting to see whether it is Donald Trump or whether it's Kamala Harris in the White House next, and what that might bring to the relationship, especially the NATO relationship with regards to Ukraine.
Amita, of course, we don't like to speculate on the free and democratic elections in other countries, but at the same time, the support of the United States of America that Ukraine receives in this war is critical. And, in our building up of the relationship with our partners, we always assume that whoever is the president of the United States of America after November 5th, the support for Ukraine is in the national interest of the United States of America, regardless of which president of which party has the majority. So we really hope and count on the bipartisan support after the elections, the way it was before.
Okay, Yuri Isak, thank you very much for your time joining us on BBC News Today, Ukrainian military advisor. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Emergency services in the United States have rescued thousands of people from flooded parts of Florida after Hurricane Milton crashed through the state yesterday, killing at least 16 people. Take a look at these pictures. This is a Coast Guard air crew rescuing a man clinging to a water cooler to float in the Gulf of Mexico, around 30 miles off the Florida coast. An incredible rescue there and a very lucky escape for that individual. More than 2.5 million homes and businesses remain without power, and authorities are warning residents not to return home because of the hazardous conditions.
A rescue at dawn for hundreds who fled for safety to neighbours upstairs. Now there is relief for a community inundated by floodwater and fear.
Did you lose your shoes?
Yes, all my shoes were inside of there.
In the block next door, a return for those in the eye of the storm.
We watched this fall. We opened our windows because we heard it start cracking.
Zain tells me there were no evacuation orders for these homes. Instead, they watched the waters surge, helpless.
Stuff from my dead grandmother. All gone.
Zain and flatmate Dania couldn't afford Florida's rising storm insurance prices. Now they say they've lost everything, but at least they didn't pay with their lives.
We kind of started to panic. We started getting like flippers and stuff to figure out how we were going to swim out of here.
As the floodwaters arrived, they were trapped inside.
I was like, worst comes to worst, we have to leave this house. We can't stay in the house, but at the same time, we can't see anything. There's a canal right behind us here. There's gators in that water. So there's a big fence holding the fence. So I was like, first thing I'm thinking, like, we're going to be eaten by alligators.
They told me when I was in elementary and middle school that Florida would be underwater in 10 to 15 years, and I think that's what's happening. Just Mother Nature fighting back.
Fighting back in what way?
Well, I mean, just the earth, the way it is right now, and how much we like pollute.
This community is battle-hardened when it comes to storms. But look at this. They've had 2 hurricanes here, back-to-back, within a fortnight. And so people here are asking the question how long they can keep going like this with the risk getting worse by the year. Scientists believe hurricanes are being supercharged by warming oceans, with the latest 2 in Florida hurtling in from a hotter than usual Gulf of Mexico. And communities here continue to face the fallout. Now they return to survey the damage, and many will wonder how many times they can keep trying to come home. Tom Bateman, BBC News, Clearwater, Florida.
And let's just move a little way along the Florida Gulf Coast from Clearwater, where Tom was reporting from, to speak to the Mayor of Treasure Island. That's Tyler Payne. Thank you very much for joining us on BBC News. And I wonder, have people who left there in advance of Milton started to return? How bad are things looking?
Yeah, I just drove around the island just before this interview, and there are still not very many people here. We were certainly spared. We fared much better than we anticipated with Milton, which was just a double whammy after the significant impacts of Helene. I'm standing in front of my parents' house, my childhood home where I was raised, where my dad was raised, and during Helene they had water up to the door, the handle on the door here. So everything inside their home was destroyed, and it does seem like everyone really heeded the evacuation orders much more seriously this time and left even further. So I think that's why we're seeing not a lot of people back on the island, but yeah.
And what level of state and federal help are you hearing about, are you actually getting at the moment?
The assistance at all levels of government has been really great so far. The biggest project that we have is the debris cleanup, because we had, like I said, homes throughout our city. We have about 6,000 residents. We're a barrier island in the Tampa Bay area, and about 75% of our homes had that 2 to 3 feet of water in them after Hurricane Helene. So everybody's belongings, all their personal items and their furniture is out by the curb and was there during Milton, which was very nerve-wracking because that could have caused some significant damage. But it fortunately didn't. It went a little bit to the south of us. But that debris collection is going to be our biggest hurdle moving forward.
So a relatively lucky escape from Milton, from being in the eye of the storm, because you are really on the front line of the Gulf of Mexico there. There's a real question then going forward, isn't there, for the community of Treasure Island about how it can keep going through cycles like this and trying to recover. What are your thoughts on that?
right? You know, a single level home like this, I think, is just not really going to be a thing of the future any longer. For a long time, we've had a lot of residents that have invested a lot of money into renovating these ground level structures. And as we're seeing more storms like this, there are federal guidelines for that FEMA puts in place when your home is damaged like this, or when you're doing a big renovation. If you're spending more than 50% of the value of your structure, you have to elevate your home and have no living space on the first floor. So I think a storm like this is going to cause a lot of those single level homes to be elevated or knocked down and elevated to a safer structure, which that's really the best way forward for island communities like ours, is to build stronger infrastructure and stronger structures that can withstand storms like this.
Really interesting to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you very much for your time. Good luck with the recovery efforts. That's Tyler Payne, the mayor of Treasure Island on the Florida Gulf Coast. Now, we can't resist bringing you another look at these stunning images from the UK. The Northern Lights, or Aurora Borealis, splashed vivid colour across night skies once again, with stunning images captured from Scotland to as far south as London. See you next.